Okay, so I noticed like we had at least one person who hasn't used Akindi before. So just to kind of give you an overview of what Akindi is a multiple choice assessment platform, which allows you to deliver assessments in an online setting for in-paper assessments, as well as for hybrid assessments. And in today's session, we're going to be covering primarily just the hybrid section of Akindi assessments. So I'm going to start sharing my screen now. And hopefully,
as I get going, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or the Q&A.
thank you, Mr. So we're going to start with using Canvas today. I know some of you may be using different learning management systems, but we're going to just show you how to enable Akindi in Canvas. While I'm doing that, Krista will also drop some links in to show you how to enable or launch Akindi in your different learning management systems. So to get started, we would go into our learning management system and select the desired course. And to enable Akindi, we're going to go down to settings in our course menu. And then on navigation, we'll scroll down, find launch Kindy, and if it wasn't enabled, it might appear further down, and just click enable. Mine's already enabled, so I don't have that option, but that's what you would see there. Once that's enabled, Akindi will appear in your course menu from then on. So here we'll click launch Akindi. We'll click the orange button, and what's going to happen now is Kindy's going to synchronize my course roster. So here I can see all of my student ID numbers have been pulled in, my student names, email addresses, and because I have sections in this course, that's also been pulled in. Since we have all of that information, the first thing that we're going to do is head over to create assessment. So Kindy's automatically populated my course name for me there. If I'd launched Kindy from a number of different assessments before, I would be able just to select the different course names there as well. And then we can name our assessment. I can just call that exam 1. Because we're going to be running a hybrid assessment today, this indicates, or kind of how we define this within Kindy, is that some of the students within my course roster are going to be completing the assessment online, while others are going to be writing that same test in person or on a printed out bubble sheet from Kindy. So the default option under assessment type is always paper. But when we're running a hybrid assessment, remember to start with online. So we're actually going to be going through the workflow of setting up the online portion of the test first before we then turn our attention to printing out our bubble sheets and scanning in the completed bubble sheets. You'll have the option to choose your assessment delivery mode. So you can have students access the online portion of the test, or the students that have been completing the test online, they can access that by clicking Launch Akindi in Canvas, which we'll show you how to do a bit later on in the session. Or you can have your students access and start their assessment from an email sent from Akindi. So that email will provide their assessment link. We're going to leave the deliver via LMS setting today. And then we have a number of different test question display options. So just to start with, show you the one question at a time option, which Akindi allows you to either start typing your test questions straight into Akindi or importing them from a Word document. And as you can see on the screen, Akindi will then display the questions on the screen for the student one at a time. We can also choose to disable backtracking with that option so students can't return to previous questions once they've accessed and answered them. A few things to note with this one. This is only supporting text-based assessment at the moment. So if you do have images in your assessment, we'll show you another option of how you can still run that same assessment, but in a slightly different way. With our one question at a time option, we also allow you to scramble or randomize the questions. So if we click turn on multiple versions, this automated scrambling means that when you either enter or upload your questions for Akindi, when the students start the test, every student within the course roster will see the test questions in a different order to one another. So Kindy will handle that automatic randomization for you. Now, as I mentioned before, if you have images in your test, there is another way to handle kind of our test question display here. Just before we move on, the other thing to note is because we're running a hybrid assessment, this one question at a time and automated scrambling, it will only scramble or randomize the questions for the online assessment. So for students completing the test in person, they'll just be completing one version of the test. We won't be able to randomize the test questions for you or provide an option for you to enter multiple answer keys. So for those instructors that do have images in their test, the best option is to turn off multiple versions here. Select our display full PDF option. So what this does is it will allow you to upload a PDF file of your test questions, and Akindi will display the contents of that PDF exactly as they appear in your file for the students when they're taking the test, alongside a bubble sheet template, so the students can see the questions and select those answer options. So if you have images or tables in your assessment, this is a great option because you don't need to worry about formatting or anything like that. With this option, you can also choose to run multiple versions of your test, both for students that are completing the test online as well as for those completing the test in person. So let's just look at that. For display for PDF, we can run up to 6 different versions of the assessment. In this option, Akindi won't be able to randomize the questions for you, either for the online side or for the in-person side of the assessment. So essentially, you'll be creating each version of the test questions yourself. And then when you move through the process of creating the assessment in Akindi, you'll be prompted to enter an answer key for each of those versions that you've set up. So I'm going to be running the one question at a time test today. We can turn on our scrambling option as well. I'm just going to pause here to see if we do have any questions before I move on to the next step in the process.
Great, thanks, Anna. There's a question around just understanding the difference between this automated scrambling versus the versions. Could you just summarize that one more time?
Yeah, absolutely. So with automated scrambling, you're going to be uploading one version of your test questions to Akindi, and Akindi is going to randomize the questions for your students. So every student in the course roster will see the questions in a different order to one another. But with our versions, you're going to be creating multiple versions of the test questions yourself, uploading each of those test question files to Akindi, and Akindi will then randomly distribute a version of the test to each student in the course roster that's completing the test online. When it comes to entering the answer key, you'll be entering an answer key for each version of the test, and you'll be able to run versions for both the students completing the test in person as well as for those online.
Awesome, thank you. That's the only question we have right now.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the next step in the process. So this is our Akindi author page. So this is something that many of you may not have seen yet, but this is a recent release. Essentially, it allows you to start typing your test questions in this page or import your test questions. But the main kind of problem we wanted to address with the introduction of this release was just making it really easy to actually either start typing or editing your questions on this page. So if I wanted to type a question, for example, I can interact with this page exactly as I would a Word document. If I want to select or create a new answer option, I just click enter or return on my keyboard. And then I can enter that. I continue to do the same thing. And for a new question, I can just click enter or return twice to create a new question. So there we have that. Some other things, obviously, like a lot of people already have their test questions put together and saved in a Word document file, for example. So you don't have to create the questions from scratch. What you can do is actually just import your questions from that docx file. So we click import questions, and now I'm going to select the file. I'm also going to show you, so here we'll upload this, but while that's happening, I'm also going to show you what exactly the contents of my file look like, so you can see like what formatting Akindi recognizes. So essentially every question should be numbered and every answer option should have the letter option next to it. And Akindi will automatically recognize these questions as well as these answer options for you. You can also format your answer key into this page. So what I've done here is I've italicized the correct answer option for this question. You could go through and italicize every correct answer option if you wanted to. You can also use boldface to do that, or changing the color of the font for the correct answer option. And you can use any font color for that. I have a variety of different ways that I've entered or kind of formatted the answer key into here. It's also worth noting that this kind of was created from the test questions that I was going to be delivering to my paper students. So I have things like my date on here, as well as the title of the assessment. Akindi isn't going to recognize those because they're not a question or answer option, but I'll show you how we can handle that within Akindi without needing to actually edit this document. So as you can see here, I have my 7 questions have been recognized. Because I formatted my answer key in there, I also have all of those marks. So my answer key has been recognized automatically as well. But I have these 2 issues here, which I need to address before I can move on to the next step in the process. Those issues are anything that Akindi wasn't able to recognize as a question or an answer option. So because none of these items fall into those 2 categories, I'm just going to delete them because I don't need to display this to my students in any way for the online portion of the test. So I can just highlight them and click delete on my keyboard, and both those lines have now been deleted. And I have 0 issues and I can move on. But before we do that, the other option to show you is the way to access our advanced marking option. So if I wanted to change the grading scheme or the weight of a particular question, I can click on our menu option here and then change the grading scheme. So I can make this a partial mark question, and I can also change the weight here. And I can see there that my marks have increased on the side. And then if I wanted to enter my answer key on this page, I can also do so just as you've seen there by selecting the correct answer option for each of those questions. So before I move on, I'm just going to stop on this page to see if we have any questions.
Yeah, you kind of just showed this already, but
Okay.
I have multiple correct responses. Is it possible to have multiple correct responses for a single question?
Yes, it is. So if that was an exact mark question, we can also do that. So even if it was 1 mark, the student would need to select both B and C in order to get the 1 mark for this question in this particular scenario. If we made that a partial mark question, students, if they selected B, they would receive half a mark for this question, so they would get partial credit. If they're all same thing for C. And if they selected both of those options, they would receive full credit for that question. And we also have either or. So whether they select B or C, they would receive the full mark for that particular question. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Mm-hmm. Will I have to input a separate answer key for paper assessments?
This is a great
Like the
question.
paper portion.
So you won't for this, no. So this will serve as your answer key for both online and paper. I don't know if I
Those are all the questions
froze there. But... Okay, great.
No, I think maybe I froze. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let us know in the chat if you didn't catch any of those answers and we can repeat them. Okay, so we've addressed everything that we need to do on this page. I can always come back to this and edit my answer key or even kind of the questions as they appear here at any point in the process. I'm going to click Save and Continue, and this next step for the students that are going to be completing the test online, I'm going to set the assessment schedule for them. So I can choose to edit my time limit. So this means that once the students have started the test, they need to complete the test within this time limit that I set. Otherwise, Akindi will automatically submit their attempt for them. I can change that in 5 hours, for example. If I don't want to have a time limit in place at all, but I just want my students to be able to access the test and take as long as they want, as long as it's within the activation and deadline window, I can choose to disable that time limit. And I can make any changes to the activation time here, as well as our deadline. So I can change the deadline. If you're not sure which student's going to be completing the test online at this point, but you know there's the potential that some might, you can just leave this as the default times and click Save and Continue, and you can come back and change these times at a later point if you do want to. So I can show you exactly how to do that. But if there's no questions around the schedule at this point, we do have some more things to cover in one moment. I will move on.
Yeah, you'll answer it in the next step. So.
Okay, great. So here we've come to our online assessment status page. As I mentioned before, I'm just going to go back to the dashboard now to show you if you did want to edit that assessment timing for students, you can just click Edit Assessment Timing here at any point in the process to make that change, which will change the time for all of the students in the course roster. And to access the page that we were just on, where we're going to be setting up accommodations for any students, as well as publishing the assessment and keeping track of our students that are completing the online assessment, we'll select this View Online Assessment Status button here. So as I mentioned, from this page, we can set up accommodation. So this might be students that require extra time for the assessment, or even just to taking the assessment at a different time compared to other students in the class. So what I can do is I can select those students that might require accommodations, go to my Actions drop-down menu and click Edit Assessment Timing. As you can see here, it says I'm customizing the assessment for just 3 students in my course. So this indicates that it's just those 3 students that I selected from the table whose assessment times are going to change. I can leave that as 5 hours, but I can say, actually, I want to change the deadline for them so they have even longer to complete that assessment. Or we could disable the time limit for them entirely. Click Save and Continue. And then here we can see these students don't have a time limit and the dates have been changed for them. So the other thing that we can do on this page is we can preview our assessment for the online portion of the test. So this is going to give me an understanding of exactly what my students are going to see once they begin the test. So Kindy always displays some assessment instructions, which just highlight essentially like when this assessment will take place, ask the student to ensure that their student name and ID is correct, etc. Once they click I agree is when the countdown timer or their time limit will begin. And they'll just go through and select the correct option for each question. scroll down to click next question, or they can use the question index as long as you haven't disabled backtracking. So as we're going through this, I can submit this preview, but because it's a preview, I can access this whenever I want, and that attempt that I just submitted is not going to go into my result. So I can refresh this and do this again as many times as I like. So now that I've previewed my assessment, what I'm going to do now is publish the assessment to my Canvas course. So as only a certain number of my students are going to be completing the test online, what I'm going to do is just select those students that were taking the test online from the table first, and then I'm going to click publish. Again, we can see that this is only going to affect 4 students there. I have the option to just publish the assessment to Canvas, or I can also have Akindi automatically send a notification email to my students. So I want Akindi to do that, so I'm going to leave this box checked. Click next, and Akindi will give me the option to customize the subject line of that email, as well as the body of the email I can customize to. Then click publish and notify. Our assessment status lets us monitor exactly what's happening with our students once we publish the assessment. So I can sort this and see that a couple of these students don't have real email addresses, so Akindi wasn't able to notify them, which is why we just see published. This one is a real email address, so we see published and notified. And when the students start taking the assessment, this assessment status will change to opened. As they complete questions, we'll see that update in real time here, as well as we'll see the amount of time that they've spent completing the assessment. Once they submit their assessment, this assessment status will change to submitted there as well. So we can always come back to this page and kind of monitor what's going on with our students at any point, even while they're taking the exam. So I'm going to show you now just what that looks like for a student completing the test online. So looks like as a student, where I would start with is going into my Canvas course. I can click launch Kindy, so that was just as exactly the same way as I did earlier as an instructor. And if the activation time had not passed yet, I would see the assessment that's just been published listed in my upcoming assessments within this student portal. But because the activation time has already passed, I can actually start taking the assessment right now, so I can see the start assessment button is activated for me. We click start assessment, and then we can see again our assessment instructions like we did with the preview. And as the student, I will start taking the exam. When we submit that, we'll see our completion message. And even if we refresh this, we won't be able to access the test again. So that's what it looks like, and that's how you would access your assessment. Your students would access assessment from the learning management system. I'm just going to go back to our main course or main assessment that we've just set up in Akindi now, and show you the paper assessment side.
And we just have a few questions. Do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
So will the students writing the paper assessment be able to see the assessment listed on the launch page?
So they will not. We've chosen just to publish this to a handful of students. So when those other students that didn't have the assessment published for them click launch Akindi, they'll still be able to access Akindi and they'll see that student portal, but they won't see any upcoming or active assessments appear there for them.
And the other question is, what if the student loses internet connection during the assessment?
A great question. So if they lose connection or even like accidentally close the browser or the tab that they have the Akindi assessment open in, Akindi's automatically saving all of their responses in the background. So when they regain their internet connection or they access the test again, Akindi will display all of the responses that the student has selected before and that Akindi was able to save. Um, just forgotten my line of thought there. Is there anything else we should add on to that, Krista? I feel like there was something.
The only other thing is that the timer will keep running.
That's it, yeah. So even if they've lost access to the internet or they've closed the tab, the time limit will continue ticking away in the background. So they're not able to game the system by closing the tab and then just reopening it 4 hours later, for example. So once that time limit runs out, Akindi will automatically submit their assessment attempt for them.
Those are all the questions right now.
Okay, great. It's worth noting that once each student completing the test online submits, that submission will go into your Akindi results automatically. You don't need to do anything in order to like upload or get the results into your Akindi assessment. So I'm going to go back to the dashboard and we're going to start looking at the paper or in-person side of the assessment now. So what we're going to see is from our dashboard, you'll have the drop-down menu under the assessment timing button. If you select that, you'll have the option to print your bubble sheets. Here you can select the different layouts that are available for your account. So on my account, I have these kind of 3 default ones. If you haven't used Akindi before, this is likely what you'll have as well, but I know some of you that have used Akindi in the past might have slightly different layout options to this. So I can select the layout option that I want to use. It's worth noting that even if I obviously only had like 7 questions on my test, I can still use this 50 question A to E layout. And Akindi will just ignore all of the blank things on the assessment that haven't been filled out on the answer key. I can then choose whether I want to pre-fill student information, so have Akindi automatically enter the student's full names as well as their student ID numbers on the test, which would allow me to print out a test sheet for each student. And I can also choose what appears in the header of the bubble sheet page once I've printed them out. So whether I want to display the course name and the assessment name on those sheets. And then we will click download, which will give us the option to download and print our bubble sheet. So what we can see here, for those of you that are familiar, having used Akindi before, especially Akindi paper, given that I haven't pre-filled my student information, here is just one blank test sheet, which I can download again or choose to print straight from this page. And I would print as many test sheets as I need for the students that are completing the test in person. So there's a few things to note when you've got the printed test sheets out. So Akindi relies on these 4 squares that appear in each corner of the test sheet page. It's really important to ensure that these are not faded or cut off or damaged in any way, as Akindi uses these to help process and grade the test sheets, as well as this QR code. So again, please just ensure that this appears on your printed test sheet as it does here, not faded, cut off, or damaged in any way. Your students can fill out their test sheets using a pen or a pencil, and if they're using a pen, it can be any color ink as long as it makes a dark enough mark on the page. A few things about the printing process. One of the key benefits with Akindi is that you can use any regular printer to print these test sheets out with normal paper, and you can also scan them back in using any regular scanner. When the students are filling out their information, if you haven't chosen to pre-fill the student information in, they'll write their first name and last name. If you've chosen to run multiple versions of your test, you'll see a number of different versions will appear here. It will have a bubble for version A, version B, version C, and so on. And the students will need to identify which version of the test they're taking by bubbling in or filling in the bubble of the version of the test that they're taking. And then they'll need to write out their student ID number as well as fill in the corresponding bubbles of their student ID number. So I'm just going to pause here to see if we have any questions around the printing side.
We actually don't have any questions on the printing side right now.
Awesome.
We do have a question that came in, just going back to the scrambling. So are we able to create a large number of questions for a Kindy to scramble? So the students wouldn't necessarily have all the questions, sort of like a question.
Yeah.
Certain questions
So
are selected.
at the moment, Akindi doesn't have the option to, let's say, allow you to upload like questions to a question bank and kind of pull different sets of questions. So the students will have access to all the same questions on the test, but it will just be randomizing the order in which they see those questions.
Right, thank you.
Okay, great. So once we've printed out our test sheets, our students have completed the test. The next step is to scan in our completed test sheets. So to do that, you would just scan the test sheets into a PDF and have that PDF emailed to your own email address. And then if we go to this View Online Assessment Status button under the assessment that we're looking at, you select the drop-down menu here. It will provide the option to upload our completed and scanned test sheets. So I'm going to click this. And then I'm going to select the PDF where I have all my scanned test sheets in. And then click upload. So Akindi is now going to start the processing and grading of my test sheets. It's worth noting that if you leave your desk or even like close this tab or like move away from this page, Kindy will continue uploading and processing those test sheets in the background. So you don't need to stay on that page. And once the Kindy has kind of processed those pages, oh, sorry, go ahead, Krista.
No, I'm so sorry. I just froze for a moment. So does it have to be one single PDF that's being uploaded, or can it be multiple PDFs?
That's a really good question. So you can upload multiple PDFs at the same time to that box. So I'm just going to show you some of our, okay, so our issues will appear here, but I'll show you how to access this page again in one moment. So to answer your question, when we go to upload response sheets, you can select multiple files and actually upload multiple files, so multiple PDFs of scanned test sheets at the same time. Or you can actually upload your scanned test sheets in batches. So I could upload one PDF file now, which has 5 sheets in, and then tomorrow upload another PDF, which has an additional 10 sheets in. And Akindi will just add that to my list of results. So it's fine to do it in batches. If you do have a large class, we recommend keeping those batches to about like 100, 150 sheets in each batch.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. So I'm going to click View Results just to go back to the page we were on. So our exceptions page. So Akindi, once it finished processing, it identified 3 issues, or what's sometimes referred to as exceptions. And these are areas where my students may not have filled in their information properly, so their names or their student ID numbers, or there might be questions where Akindi is not quite sure how to grade the response. So it wants me to step in and intervene. So on this particular issue that's come up here, the student's written out their name and also their student ID number, but they haven't filled in the corresponding bubbles for their student ID number. So Akindi's not sure which test to assign which student to assign this test to. It's given me some suggestions here which don't look correct. So I can go to this drop-down menu and actually search from my course roster in Akindi to find the student that this test belongs to. I'll select those and I think I need to clear the cache on my laptop. Normally, this would appear as a green tick, but we have it as a green box today. And for this student here, they haven't filled out any information related to their student ID number. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to search for them. The little green tick or box indicates that Akindi saved that. Then we have our questions. So Kindy will call to attention anytime a student has selected more answer options than appear on your answer key. So my answer key for question 2, it looks like there was only one correct answer option, but the student, it looks like, has selected 2. So Kindy's asking me what to do here. I can see from this image that the student tried to cross out C. So I want to grade them, assuming that they only selected B here. To do that, I can just untick C. That green tick or green box indicates that Akindi has now updated the grading for this particular student. And for any of these things, these images that have come up, I can actually click into them, see which test sheet this came from. So I can see, okay, this is an image of the actual scan test sheet. This is the student that this issue came up from. Just want to see if there's any questions around exceptions or issues before I move on to our results.
We don't have any questions coming in right now.
Okay, perfect. So when you click view results from your course dashboard, the first page that you come to is the overview page. And essentially this provides analytics on your assessment. The Akindi's attempting to answer 2 questions. So the first is, how well did my students do? So how well did they perform on this particular assessment? And the second is, how well was my test designed? So here, what Akindi is displaying for us is our average percentage grade for the test overall, our highest percentage grade, as well as the lowest percentage grade. And it's worth noting that this is a amalgamation of all of my responses, both paper and online responses here. Akindi's identified what it thinks is the easiest and most difficult questions on my test based on the percentage or number of students that got that particular question correct or incorrect. I can hover over any of these to actually see the full breakdown. So the number, or hover over the bar, the percentage of students that selected each answer option for that particular question. Same thing for my most difficult questions. And on how well was my test designed, Akindi is going to be providing a discriminatory score for you here. So what we're attempting to do here is provide the correlation between whether a student answered a question correct or not, and how well they performed on the test overall. So what I would be expecting to see for a well-constructed question is a student that performed got a high mark on the test overall would get a well-constructed question correct. And any student, for example, like a low performing student that got a question correct and a high performing student that got that same question incorrect, Akindi would probably identify that as a question that might need intervention or could be improved, as it would have a particularly low discriminatory score. So it's worth noting here that even though I imported my test questions at the start, Akindi's not using the actual content of my questions here. This is just a statistical analysis to determine the best constructed questions, as well as those that might require some improvement. So I can see that there's 2 questions here that require some improvement. It's worth noting that there might be a few different reasons for this. So it might be I just made a mistake on my answer key that I want to change, or I have a particular ambiguous question, which I can actually make changes for later cohorts. But there may be some things that I also want to do to address that issue for this particular cohort of students, which I'll come to in a moment. Also, if you have sections in your course, you can choose to toggle these analytics and all of the results by sections as well. If you had uploaded different versions of the assessment, you'd also see a versions box here where we could see the results analysis by version of the assessment. I'm going to move on to our graphs tab. So here we can see our student marks for every student that completed the test, the grade distribution for the assessment, our answer breakdown, so the number of students that got a question, each question correct versus incorrect. If I select any of the bars within this chart, I can see the full breakdown of the number or percentage of students that selected each answer option. And then our point by serial or discriminatory score. So whereas Akindi was only providing kind of calling to attention the scores for certain questions, here I can see the discriminatory score for every question on my test there. The next thing is our responses tab, which actually provides the full kind of raw breakdown of all of the student responses from my test, both online and paper responses. So I can see here the percentage grade as well as the mark for each student, as well as all of the different answer options they selected. So just to explain a bit about the key here, any cell that is blank or appears white indicates the student got that question correct. Red indicates the student got the question incorrect, and we can see some orange cells here, which means that the student actually skipped those options and hasn't submitted or hasn't selected a response for those particular questions. So again, because they have a variety of students that took the test in person versus online, I can see different submission times. For my online for my students that completed the test in person, Kindy is just displaying the submission time as when I uploaded those scanned test sheets. But for my online submission, it's showing exactly when that student clicked submit and Akindi was able to process and grade that particular online submission there. So every online submission is likely to have a slightly different submission time. So as I mentioned before, sometimes there are times where we need to make changes to the answer key, and you can actually do this directly from this page here. So it can identify questions 2 and question 4 as questions that might require some intervention or review from me. So what I want to do is actually give all my students in the course credit for question 2, regardless of what they selected. So under my answer key row, I can just locate question 2 and double click into that option to bring up the answer key editor. To give everybody credit, I can change this to an either or question and then select all of the answer options here. Click OK. And then we'll see at the top of my table, I have a save changes. Remember to click that. And then Akindi will automatically regrade all of my students against that updated answer key. So in terms of what we can do with our results now that we have them here, there are a number of ways that we can either export the results or provide the grades or the full breakdown to students. So to start with, we can actually export what we're seeing in this table or kind of some of the information we're seeing in this table now by clicking our download CSV option. If you wanted access to the information that we provided in the graphs tab, we can use the download question breakdown CSV option. We also have the option to email students their grades. So for this option, we can do this for both in-person and online submissions. You'll send a email from Akindi, and Akindi will provide a link to a report for each student, which will showcase their overall percentage grade, the marks they got, as well as either showing the image of their scanned and graded test sheet, or it will just be their graded online response. And I'll show you what that looks like in one moment. That email, the subject line is customizable, as is the email message. And we can choose whether we want to show correct answers against any incorrect responses or not. If we don't want to do that, we just want to display green ticks and red crosses, I can choose to untick this. And there under this email column, we can see whether that's been sent. Because I have a lot of fake email addresses, I can see that we have some errors there. So in terms of what that report looks like, for our in-person or paper submissions, what Akindi will show, as I mentioned, is our percentage grade and overall marks. And here I can see the actual image of this student's test sheet. So because I have or may have selected show correct answers, and next to any incorrect answers, it can just display the correct answer option there and just indicating with a green tick any questions they got correct. For the online portion of my test, if I click this report, you may not see much on here, but the student didn't select many answer options. But this is what that report would look like for a student that completed the test online. So same information in terms of percentage grade, mark overall, as well as the breakdown of here is the particular answer option that I selected as the student, as well as the grading, and any correct answers may or may not be displayed depending on what I've chosen to have in my settings. One thing to note with hybrid assessments is you can download corrected test sheets. However, for any students that completed the test online, we won't be able to kind of have their submission attempts included in that. So when we're downloading these reports, it will just download the students that completed the test in person or on paper. So the best option for hybrid assessments is often to email students their grades. Or if you have this report column enabled on your account, you can also bring this up to show the student and kind of walk through this with the student what their test looked like and talk through some feedback around that if you need to. Final thing on this page is sending the grades back to our learning management system. Because I'm using Canvas, this is why it appears as Canvas, but this would be whatever learning management system you're using if you do have that integration set up. So I can click Send Grades to Canvas, and I can either create a new grade column in Canvas, or I can select an existing one here. So for example, if I already have an exam 1, I can select that. I can also scale my grades. So even though the test is currently out of 10, if I want it to appear out of 100 in Canvas, I can do so just by changing that in this box. A tip is this is also a quick way to kind of bulk change the weight of questions. So if, for example, I have 10 questions, but I want every question to be worth 2 marks, I can also do that here. So it appears out of 20. Click Export. And then all of those grades will be sent over to the Canvas gradebook, and I can see there that that's successfully being sent for all of those students, both those that completed the test in person as well as online. So I'm going to stop here. We've covered quite a lot around the responses to see if we have any questions.
Yes. So for a student that wrote scrambled questions online, do the results appear in the order that they wrote them or the answer key order?
This is a great question. So even though we had our online assessment test questions scrambled and the students saw them scrambled, when I'm looking at my results here, it's being presented in the order of the answer key that I created. So when I uploaded those questions and set my answer key, that's the order that we're seeing the questions in here. And that's what the student would also see on the report. The questions would be in the order of the answer key, not in the order that they saw the questions on the test.
When editing the answer key, does the key change for both online and in-person students?
Yes, that's correct. So every student that appears in my results table will be regraded anytime I make any edits to the answer key.
Perfect. And then final question right now, is it possible to tell from the responses tab who wrote online and who wrote in person?
So actually, Kristen, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's an easy way to distinguish that. That's a great piece of feedback though. So thank you for posting that question. Oh.
like all the paper responses would have the same submission time, so there's an upload time.
Mhm.
But yeah, there isn't an easy way to.
Yeah, exactly. You're right, Krista. I think that would be the best way to do it at the moment is just by distinguishing the submission times. Okay, awesome. If that's
That's all the
all
questions.
questions, okay, I'm going to move back to our course dashboard just to show you two more final things. So one of them is our collaborate option. Many of you people that have used Akindi before might be familiar with this. Essentially, this allows you to add a collaborator to your course in Akindi. So if you have faculty or other staff that help you or work with you on the same course and with these assessments, we can actually choose to add them here. So I could add, for example, one of Krista's Canvas ones. Because Chris has already got a account with Akindi, that's why I have the option to select that there. Otherwise, I'd write out her full email address. I can choose the permissions that are enabled for Krista, as well as the sections, if you have sections in your course that those permissions apply to. So if she had can view, it would mean that she'd be able to view everything within my course, but wouldn't be able to create new assessments, edit existing assessments, upload response sheets for existing assessments, or send the grades back to Canvas. If she had can edit permissions, she would be able to do most of the things that I can do as a course owner, like creating new assessments, editing existing assessments. The only things that she wouldn't be able to do are making changes to this course collaborators option by adding new collaborators or removing collaborators, as well as sending the grades back to Canvas. And if I set her up as an admin, then she would be able to do exactly the same things as I can as the owner of the course. We'll click invite. And of course, she's already sent something. So at that point, Akindi will actually send Krista an email notifying her that she's been invited to collaborate on my Intro to Sociology course in Kindy. And final thing is this little icon that will appear on every page in the Kindy app. So this gives you access to a number of things. So one of them is, might be my internet. Our list of like help articles. So you can actually search for help articles within this particular browser. Also, what you would normally be expecting to see here is the option to message a member of our support team. So you would basically just see like send a message button here. It's like very simple. I'm sorry it's not appearing for us just now. Our support team are available from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern time, Monday to Friday. And we always attempt to respond to you. There we go, eventually got there. So you see the send a message button here. And we always attempt to reply to you within 30 minutes of receiving your message. Couldn't load these, but this is where we would see the options to search our articles. The other thing is you can actually access our help center here. And this will allow you to search from a large number of our tutorials, which video tutorials, as well as just general FAQs and articles. There we go. Sorry, my internet is not being great today. But here, as I mentioned, you can actually search your question in here and Akindi will bring up relevant articles, or you can actually browse through the full collection here. So I'm just going to stop to see if we have any final questions before we do a quick wrap up from today's session.
We don't have any questions right now, but I'll let you know if any come in the next minute.
Perfect, thank you. So just to summarize, in terms of the hybrid workflow, you'll be able to launch Akindi from your learning management system. If you need any assistance in enabling or figuring out how to launch Akindi to create your Akindi account, Krista will also be posting those links again in the chat. Then when you go to create assessment, remember to select online, go through the steps of setting up the online side of your assessment. Then from your course dashboard, use these drop-down menus to print the bubble sheets and then upload the bubble sheets and all of your results will be housed within the results of this particular assessment, and you can do every kind of normal way of exporting the assessment results once they're in your Akindi assessment. So if we don't have any other questions, just want to say thank you so much for attending today. When you do exit the webinar, you are going to see just two feedback questions around what you thought of the hybrid workflow, as well as just seeing what we can do to improve your experience overall with Akindi.
Thank you all so much.
So I'll stop sharing now, but Krista and I will hang around if you do have any last minute questions. But thank you, everybody.